Study with Learn. Which of the following is true about a positive displacement pump? Choose an answer. It can be started with the suction valve closed. It must never be started with the discharge valve closed. It should never be started without fluid in the casing. It must always be started with the discharge valve open. Don't know. Terms in this set. 121. What is the methane content in a properly operating anaerobic digester? 65 to 70% by volume. What is the purpose of a partial flume? Measure flow rate. What is the typical removal efficiency of settlable solids in a primary clarifier? 95 to 99%. What might cause thick billows of white sudsy foam in the aeration tank? MLSS is too low. What does the M and FM ratio represent? The mixed liquor volatile suspended solids in the aeration tank. In general, how will warmer temperature affect the settling rate of solids in a clarifier? Increase the settling rate. Which of the following is true about a positive displacement pump? It must never be started with the discharge valve closed. Which of the following is one of the basic rules of laboratory work? Never pipette hazardous material with your mouth, even if the pipette has been sterilized. What is the purpose of the grit channel? Remove heavy and organic wastes. What is the correct formula for solids in raw wastewater? Non-settlable solids plus settlable solids equals total suspended solids. What is freeboard in a waste stabilization pond? The vertical distance from normal water surface to the top of the levee, prior to entering a permit-required confined space. What should you verify? A standby person should be located outside the entrance to the confined space, while another person should be within sight or call of the standby person. What is a common way to determine the organic strength of wastes in the influent? Test for the biochemical oxygen demand. What should you do if you are mildly exposed to chlorine gas? Immediately evacuate the contaminated area, remain calm, keep warm, breathe lightly, and avoid coughing. What are the main sources of domestic sewage in the collection system? Households and commercial establishments. What are mostly removed in the grit channel? Sand, eggshells, cinders, and heavier particulate matter. Which gas diminished your sense of smell? Hydrogen sulfide. Which of the following enters the headworks of a treatment plant? Influent. What is the equivalent of 1 mg L? 1 ppm. What is equivalent to organic solids? Volatile solids. What should be done if a large amount of organic matter is found in the grit channel? Increase the velocity of wastewater. What is the difference between the sludge from a primary clarifier and secondary clarifier? Primary sludge is denser than secondary sludge. Which process includes a blower? Activated sludge. A. How does an activated sludge system remove waste from wastewater? Biological treatment. Which of the following best describes perchlorination? Addition of chlorine to wastewater at the entrance to the plant, and used for odor control, BOD reduction, grease removal, and aid sedimentation. When would you expect reduced algae population and less oxygen released into a pond? Fall and winter, when the weather is cool and sunlight is reduced. What is the first steps of lockout-tagout procedure? Notify all affected employees that a lockout or tagged system is going to be used and the reason why. What type of process is the activated sludge system? Aerobic. What might cause sludge to rise in a clarifier? Gasification from aging sludge. The temperature of the plant influent is slightly warmer than tap water. The purpose of disinfection is to destruction or inactivation of pathogenic bacteria. What must you do before entering a room with harmful concentration of chlorine gas in the air? Wear self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA. What does black sludge at the bottom of a secondary clarifier, located downstream of a trickling filter signify? Sludge has stayed in the secondary clarifier too long. Which of the following is true about algae in a pond? During the daytime, the algae will release oxygen for the aerobic bacteria in the pond. The effectiveness of disinfection is determined by the coliform concentration in the effluent. How often should the sludge at the bottom of a clarifier be pumped? Frequently throughout the day. Which of the following is not associated with an aeration tank? RBC. What creates hydrogen sulfide? Decomposing organic matter under anaerobic condition. Which type of bacteria is used for a trickling filter? Aerobic bacteria. Which of the following is not associated with a trickling filter? Filamentous bacteria. What is an MCRT? An expression of the average time a microorganism will spend in an activated sludge process. What is the typical BOD removal efficiency in a primary clarifier? 20 to 50%. What does the F and FM ratio represent? The food for the microorganisms flowing into the aeration tank, in lbs day. Which of the following describes the appearance of healthy activated sludge? Brown with a moderate amount of crisp, white foam. What is used to control filamentous organisms? Chlorine. What are commonly used to control chlorine feed rate for disinfection? Flow and chlorine residual. Which toxic gas is commonly found in septic wastewater and smells like rotten eggs? Hydrogen sulfide. What is the permissible exposed limit for chlorine gas vapor during a normal 8-hour workday and a 40-hour workweek? 0.5 ppm. What is a vulnerability assessment? Contingency planning to determine the vulnerability of the utility during various types of emergencies and identify corrective actions to reduce the risks. What is the difference between the setting rate of activated sludge and raw sludge? Activated sludge settles slower than raw sludge. What should be mostly found in healthy activated sludge? Free swimming and stocked ciliates. 1 to 2% of the digester gas in an anaerobic digester consists of hydrogen, nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, and other gases. What is true during the colder winter months? Modify operations to increase solids under aeration to provide more microorganisms to treat the BOD. What type of sludge would you expect in an aeration tank if the content is dark and has low dew? Septic sludge. What could happen if the volatile acid alkalinity ratio starts to increase and corrective action is not taken immediately? Carbon dioxide content in the digester gas will increase. What are screenings? Pieces of wood, root, rags, and other large debris. What happens when there is more food in the influent to the aeration tank? More oxygen is required in the aeration tank. What impact does temperature have on the reaction rate of microorganisms in wastewater? Reaction rate doubles with every 18 °F increase in temperature until higher temperature inhibits biological activity. What is commonly used to control the odor of hydrogen sulfide? Chlorine. What is used to determine the amount of microorganisms in the aeration tank? Mixed liquor volatile suspended solids, MLVSS. What could happen if the sludge line is isolated by closing the valves on each end for several days? Gas production could increase the internal pressure and cause the line to fail. Which is true about chlorine gas? It is 2.5 times heavier than air. Which of the following is typically treated by biological processes? Dissolved and non-settable organic material. Which document is written record that accurately traces the custody of wastewater samples through all phases of monitoring program? Chain of custody form. What could cause a sudden drop in pH of the influent? Acidic chemical in the influent. What is the recommended daily maintenance activity for a clarifier? Inspect the chains, sprockets, and flights. Which of the following could be the cause of ponding in a trickling filter? Excessive ordinate loading. What could happen if the dissolved oxygen content in the aeration tank is too low? Filamentous organisms could thrive, and the sludge flock comes settling properly in the secondary clarifier. What is the expected BOD removal efficiency in a facultative pond? Mostly between 70 to 80%. What is chloramine? Combined chlorine, a chemical that is formed when chlorine reacts with ammonia. What is sludge bulking in an activated sludge process? When mixed liquor solids slowly and compact to a limited extent. What is the most common imbalance in an anaerobic digester? Excess acid formation. What is the only reliable method of detecting hydrogen sulfide? Atmospheric monitoring. What is sludge age? A rough indicator of the length of time a pound of solids is maintained under aeration. What is one of the benefits of COD test over a BOD test? Shorter test period. What is the typical detention time for a primary clarifier? 1.5 to 2 hours. If you are testing the pH of a wastewater sample, what is the maximum recommended holding time? I must be tested immediately. What could cause short-circuiting in a clarifier? Uneven wear settings. What could cause the slime growth on a rotating biological contractor to appear black? It could indicate solids or organic overloading. What is an air gap? Backflow prevention. Which is true about chlorine demand? Chlorine demand equals chlorine dose. Chlorine residual. What is accomplished by the activated sludge process? Remove soluble or finely divided suspended materials. What is the carbon dioxide content of a properly functioning anaerobic digester? 30 to 35% by volume. Which of the following is a collection of individual samples obtained at regular intervals? Composite. What is the most common piece of laboratory equipment, which is used mainly to mix chemicals and measure approximate volumes? Beaker. What are colloids? Very small, finely divided solids that remain dispersed in a liquid for a long time. What is a common type of grit collector? Chain-driven scrapers called flights. What is true about surface loading and detention time? They are directly related to flow. What is the smile growth on a trickling filter called? Zugliel film. What should be done if you observe a small, steady stream of water leaking from the pump packings? Do nothing. The leaking is required to cool and lubricated the dynamic surface. What should be done if SVI is high and there is an excess of normal filamentous microorganisms in the activated sludge process? Chlorine. The return activated sludge. When is a confined space considered oxygen deficient? In atmospheres where the oxygen content is less than 19.5% by volume. Which of the following is not true about chlorine gas? Common chlorine gas concentration at treatment plants is 12.5%. What is a dead spot in an activated sludge process? An area in the aeration tank that has insufficient mixing. Which of the following is an improper way to control an anaerobic digester? Control the acid formation so that it is larger than the methane formation. Which of the following is not true about permitted confined space entry? Testing for atmospheric hazards is not required as long as a blower is in use. What is an MSDS? A document that contains important information about a chemical, such as safe exposure level, flammability rating, and first aid procedures. How often should grit be removed from the grit channel? Daily. What is the typical removal efficiency for bacteria in a primary clarifier? 25 to 75%. What problem could most likely cause a centrifugal pump to discharge at a reduced rate? Damaged impeller. What are the two categories of coliform bacteria? Total and fecal. Which of the following is true about the extended aeration process? It has low FM ratio. What type of disinfection is gaining in popularity and expected to become a practical alternative to chlorination? Ultraviolet. UV disinfection. Where is the proper sampling location for an effluent from a wastewater treatment plant prior to discharge into receiving waters? What is true if the FM ratio increases? More dew is needed. Who must be included in a hearing conservation program to prevent hearing loss? Employees whose normal noise exposure equals or exceeds an 8-hour time-weighted average of 85 decibels. What is a major cause of repeated sludge bulking? High food-to-microorganism loading rates. How can the efficiency of trickling filter be improved? Add recirculation. During the day, what typically happens to a pond as a result of the algae? Algae uses carbon dioxide which raises pH. What should be done to find a small chlorine leak? Tie a rag on a stick, dip the rag in a strong ammonia solution, and hold the rag near the suspected points. What should you do if there is a thick, dark foam on the surface of an aeration tank? Increase sludge wasting. Why is mixing important in an anaerobic digester? Speeds up digestion rate. Where is the correct location for a vent inside a room storing chlorine gas? Within 12 inches of the floor. What is the purpose of the seal water at the stuffing box in a pump? Lubricate the packing. What is the incubation period for the BOD test? 5 days plus 3 hours. What could happen if you are exposed to very high concentration of hydrogen sulfide? It could quickly lead to death. What causes primary effluent to become black and odorous? Improper sludge removal from the clarifier. What is biomass? A mass of organic material consisting of living organisms that feed on the wastes and sewage. What is the color of a pond that is operating properly? Deep green color. What does healthy activated sludge smell like? Earthy. Which law regulates wastewater discharge to receiving waters? Clean Water Act.